This financial literacy video is brought to you by Young Kings and Queens in partnership with Comerica Bank.
Class started. Our topic this evening is going to be debt management. This should really be fun. I might have some questions myself here, but Mike, go ahead and you can get started.
All right. Thanks to Keisha. Welcome everybody for joining another night of financial literacy. We appreciate you joining Joe and I over these multiple nights, and tonight's my turn. And we'll be talking about debt management. Just a little bit about me. I've been with Comerica Bank for 23 years. I'm an external affairs market manager, and I was 17 years in the retail bank with Comerica Bank. So I have talked to lots of folks like yourself and small business owners about debt management, and I think it's an important topic. And as we go through it, if you have questions, try to get them to us, and I will try to answer them. If not, Takesha has my email. Get them to her. I will get answers to you because I think it's that important that we do that. So I'm going to share my screen. And Takesha, I can't tell. Did it flip over?
Yes, I see debt management.
All right, so we're going to start with debt management. And so we're going to start out tonight with a real quick, not the post, but the pretest. Oh, I put the answers on there. I'm sorry. I'm going to give everybody answers at the same time we're talking about this. I'm bad. So thinking about your debt management. So in addition to money issues, what effects can debt have on a person's life? And think about it. There's lots of influence that can, when you have debt. Mental health, your regular health can have a negative influence on it, can have an impact on relationships. It may have a negative impact on reaching your life goals. So if you're getting close to retirement and you're carrying more debt than you'd like, you may funnel money to get rid of debt, but it might cause you not to meet that goal. So all of that can negatively affect what you're trying to do. Question 2, what is the first and most important steps in managing debt? And we're going to talk about that in the next 2 weeks, and that's called creating a solid budget. And I will tell you very honestly, my wife says I make a great budget, and then I take a pencil to it and I punch a whole bunch of holes in it throughout the month. So the goal is to create that budget and live within that budget, because if you don't, then you have other things you're looking to try to do to make ends meet. 3, which of the following debt management strategies are considered risky and should be fully researched? You got consolidation, negotiation, credit counseling, but the one that you really want to think about is debt settlement. What does it mean? How do you do it? And what kind of negative effect will it have? Credit counseling, you see the advertisements where you have someone work with you, creating a plan and a budget and help you. You have some folks will go out there and negotiate with creditors. Debt consolidation, same along the same lines. Debt settlement is something along the same lines, but it can have a really negative effect depending upon how it is done. So do a lot of research around that to be well informed before you go that route. Of course, what of the following is not true of bankruptcy? You got to remember, when you do bankruptcy, it's going to stay on your credit report for 7 to 10 years, not less and not more. It discharges certain debts, giving people a fresh start. That is not true. Not all debt is discharged in a bankruptcy. So an example, if you have student debt, and depending upon how you took it out, you cannot discharge student debt through bankruptcy. Of course, it may force people to liquidate their assets. That is true. You may have to liquidate any asset that the court deems needed to meet your liabilities as you go through bankruptcy. So all of that is true. What is the name of the debt management strategy in which you pay off the debt with the lowest balance first? It's called the snowball method. We're going to talk about that later tonight. And it's a really nice method. I like it. It's the one I recommend folks to use, because I tell folks, when you start that journey of managing your debt, you want to have wins. And when you get wins, you have good feelings, and it makes you excited to do more of the right thing. So it's positive reinforcement. And when may debt consolidation be a good debt management strategy? When you have multiple debts and are paying many bills a month, when your debts have a high interest, when you can get a brand new loan at a lower interest rate than the ones you currently have. So all three of those are great examples of way we're looking at debt consolidation. So we're going to get into the script here. And Takesha, just let me know if someone asks a question, or interrupt me if you got a question, because we'll have fun. So here we go. In the workshop, understand why people find themselves in debt. And of course, the most common types of debt. We're going to analyze some budgeting and debt management strategies. We're going to look at various debt management solutions and kind of get you started down the path for a personal plan for managing your debt. So we're kind of setting up a table here to help you be successful in your financial life. And you may be successful already, and you might just want a little tweak to make it better, which means I'm already going to take my hat off to you, because you've got a handle on it and you just want to improve your knowledge to look at and see what will help you out. So just kind of give you an idea of the scope of debt across the board. It's not just young people, middle age, or old age. It's across the board. And when you look at that, there's quite a bit of it. And this is not really kind of taking into factor of house debt or student debt, because if you did that, that number would probably be bigger. I've seen numbers that say credit card debt in itself is an average of $7,000 to $10,000 per person of everybody. So think about that. That's not just individuals who are earning a wage. That's based on if you're age zero. So my grandson, who's not even a year old, based on an average, they would say he would have $7,000 in credit card debt. He doesn't, but that's how they come up with that average. So just looking at that, a lot of baby boomers like myself are looking to get ready to get into retirement. They're carrying $36,000 to $40,000 in debt that's outside of house debt. That's a lot of debt that you're going to have to manage while you get closer to retirement. And you want to focus more resources or save more resources to that retirement age. Of course, we talked about the high price of debt. We talked about all the different things that has a negative effect: mental health, physical health, relationships, life goals, planning for emergencies. Remember, when you have a lot of debt, excuse me, you do not have much wiggle room to pay for a set of tires for your cars if you have an issue, or all of a sudden you have brakes go out on your car, you need to fix them. Well, if you have a lot of debt, you don't have a lot of savings. Now you're going to add more debt to cover that emergency, or you have a medical emergency. And now we're talking about a significant impact on how we manage our money. So, like Joe said, we got to start off with the baseline of some knowledge. And so what is debt? Debt is the amount of money owed by a person or their household for products and services they purchased on credit. Of course, what is interest? Most of the time, interest is the cost of borrowing money, where the borrower pays the fee to the lender for the loan. So when you're looking for a loan, so I have a friend who's looking for a car loan. They're going to buy a car, and they've got a good rate, 2.99. That's a terrific rate. But at 6 months to a year ago, that same rate was about 1.99. So the rate's gone up. Of course, the flip side is you look at interest rates, and you're saving money. So you receive an interest rate for that money that you're savings. And the interest rates have been really low because we've artificially kept our interest rates that we pay out in savings low. Of course, there's two different kinds of interest rates. One's a fixed rate. If you think about a car loan, that's the best way to describe a fixed rate, because it's going to be the same interest rate of her rate of 2.99 for her entire life of her loan for her car. So if she borrows, for example, $30,000 and pays it over for 5 years or 60 months, her rate is going to be 2.99 through the entire life of that loan, where the variable interest rate is just what it means. It's going to go up or down based on other factors outside the control of you. So a credit card is a good example of that. A credit card company is going to look at your credit history as one factor to determine what interest rate you are going to receive. They're going to look at what the current interest rate environment is, and then they're going to tie it to what they call like the federal rate that's set every month by the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve rate goes up every 30 days. That rate's going to match that, going up by that same percentage. So if you started out with 12% and the Federal Reserve raised their rates from 0 to 2%, you're going to go from 12 to 14 within those 30 to say 60 or 90 days, depending upon how long they spread over that interest rate increase. So that's why it's important to understand what interest rates you have and what they're being charged on, and how it'll be affected in the future by a change of interest rate in our system. So here's a real quick scenario. So if Ralph makes a monthly payment of $50 per month on his credit card with 17%, how long would you estimate it will take him to pay off $3,000 in his roof repair? So just think, 135 months, 35 months, 11 months, or 95 months. Remember, he's only making a $50 payment and his interest rate is 17%. To do quick math on this, and we're just going to say 20%, and 3,000 is 600 a year, divide by 12 is almost zero. So really thinking about it, because he's paying so little into his $3,000, it's going to take him the longest period of time. And that's the catch about credit card debt. They get you going and you can never seem to get off that treadmill. Of course, I talked a little bit earlier about the biggest sources of debt, and the biggest sources of debt in America, number one, or A, is student loans. I know a lot of folks, my daughter's an example. My other son is an example also. He's 40, he's still carrying some student loan debt. My daughter just turned 28, she's carrying student loan debt, and it will be multiple years before either one of them have paid that debt off because of the size of that debt for their education. Of course, credit cards, mortgages, home mortgages, and you wouldn't think about it, but there's a lot of people that get stuck in the revolving door, as I call it, of payday loans. And if you know about payday loans, please, please, please try to stay away from them. Try to do a lot of other things before you get into a payday loan. In my day in the retail bank, I saw too many people get caught up in the payday loan scenario where they never got off that treadmill, and then they had a significant issue, and then all of a sudden they had overdraft fees, and it was just a mess in their financial life, and it cost them lots of money to fix something that they couldn't handle because they got stuck in not 17%, but 300% because the payday loan It's for a small time frame. And they say, yeah, it's 17% for that time frame. You said, okay, normally a loan would be 17% for, say, for the entire year. In this case, it's for a week. Now you multiply 17% by 52 weeks and you can see where that problem comes into effect. So what are people using their money for or spending on that's causing excessive debt? Well, we all go out and dine, and I pay on my credit card, and you probably do too, because I want to get some points and some interest back when I do that. That's okay as long as you pay it off at the end of 30 days. Folks use it for personal passions and hobbies. You know, you might want to collect coins. And one way to do that is, of course, you buy a coin, you see one you haven't got for your collection, you whip out your credit card and buy it that way instead of saving up for it and buying it after you've saved your cash. Personal care, of course, and leisure travel. And a lot of people will take and borrow money to go on vacation. I would ask you to think twice. Everybody deserves to go on vacation. I will not ever argue that point. I will argue the point, though, does that vacation need to cost you $4,000 in debt? Especially when that's going to take you 2 years to pay back instead of, you know, saving up for that really nice vacation. So it might take you 2 years to do a $4,000 vacation, say like a cruise, because I just did a cruise. And I can tell you the cost per week on a boat, when you really think about it, it's about $4,000. It's really sneaky on how they charge everything. So I saved up for my 2 years to do my cruise, and it was a lot of fun, but now I got to wait another 2 years before I do it again. So I'll have a lot of stay vacations. Just think that through when you're doing that, folks. So we have, and you've heard conversations about good debt versus bad debt. I think that's always interesting when you hear that conversation. They say not all debt is created equal. I will tell you, debt is debt. Some debt is looked at more favorably than other debt, and it may cause the same issue as bad debt. If you get overextended in good debt, you will have the same problems as bad debt. You know, they call good debt mortgage in a house because in theory, you're building up valuation that when you sell it in the future, you're going to get more money back. And of course, in student loans, give you an educational leg up on the competition to be able to find jobs that will pay more than the regular rate in the community. But I always tell folks, if you're earning $30 an hour and you got your college degree or community college degree, and someone says, well, you can go to school and you can earn more money, but it costs you, say, $30,000 or $40,000 to take that next step, and you only go up from 30 to 32, did you really improve your lifestyle based on that $2 an hour increase? So really look into and making sure that if you add to your life in student debt, that the payout in your income increase makes sense. Because if it's not there, I would challenge you to think twice and figuring out other ways to acquire that knowledge that help you increase your earnings income. The same thing with mortgage. I had the first mortgage person I worked with said, always want to go as high as possible on your mortgage because you'll get a bigger house and it'll be all good. And I told them no. I said, we're not going to go that route, because if something happens financially in our life, say one of us lost a job or something happened, someone gets injured and can't work for 6 months, then all of a sudden, if we had dual income, that dual income would not be able to pay for that mortgage, and we wouldn't be able to feed ourselves. So making a good decision on mortgage, because you need to have, when you're paying a mortgage, you also have to have other money to keep your household running. Plus, you need to have extra money to make repairs to that house So when you sell it, it's in a good condition, because it doesn't do you any good to buy a house and 30 years later sell it and you need to replace the roof, the garage, the back deck. You have so much repair, you spend all that money to fix it that you never get it back. Of course, they call bad debt credit cards with high interest rates. There are some credit cards, but you have to search for them, that have good rates. And new cars. Everybody's heard the factor that if you buy a new car, you lose 20% of the value when you drive it off the lot. In today's environment, I would almost challenge you, when you're looking at a used car and a new car, what's the difference in the age and the price? Because right now, there is not a lot of difference in between that new car and that used car. So figuring out which works best for you, do some research on that, because we live in an environment where car travel is beneficial, because we do not have the infrastructure for community travel. Bus services is not covered like bigger cities where they have trams, trains, subways. We're really reliant on car travel in our communities. So looking at that, managing that, and understanding that.
Mike,
Yes,
we
ma'am.
I think you have someone in the waiting room.
All right, let me flip. I don't know if I can even see them.
Okay.
Looking to see if I can pop it up
Okay.
on my. Yeah, I have only the small window, so it really doesn't show me
The
here.
participants.
Yeah, hold on. Let's see if I can. All right. Let's see if it's up here. Oh, wait, it's over here. All right, so in chat, it says Sheena is in the waiting room.
That's the chat. And so she should be in the participant box.
I do not have a name in there.
Oh no.
Just myself and yourself.
Okay. Well, don't worry about it.
I'm looking to see if it's what happens when I have too many screens.
Well, that's okay. I'll just have her keep watching from Facebook. No big deal.
All right.
Yep.
All right. So now I left the chat open. So if you type something in chat, you're gonna have to tell me to turn my head, because I can't see it otherwise.
Okay. We can keep going.
So you know what? We'll do a quick break, and while I'm taking a sip of water, if maybe someone has a question before I move on, I'll answer some questions if there's any questions out there.
I don't see any, but I did have one when you were talking about saving for vacations. Now it seems like because everybody started vacationing more, everybody started, picking up the you only live once lifestyle. They have these companies where you like pay for your vacation like on an installment plan. Is that a good option? Like in regards to the interest rates and stuff applied to that?
All right. So that's a great.
Yeah.
So you can do what's called a timeshare. And that's what I'm thinking you're thinking about. It's like a timeshare where you buy a week of time from, we'll pick on Hilton. And Hilton has timeshares. And so we were in Orlando and we sat down and with another couple we went with, and we sat through their 4-hour presentation on their timeshare, which was for a week, and it was based on points. And so you, for a certain number of points, you paid a fee, a real estate fee for that. And then every year you have what I call HOA, a yearly fee that you have to pay on top of that. So you have to determine if the amount that they asked for, or that week that they were going to sell you, the value, and it was like a 10-year contract. So, and I'm not going to go over the pricing because the pricing can be all over. Just
Yeah.
remember, they're going to start out high and they're going to keep going down until, you know, they say, why aren't you buying it? And just remember these words. If you don't think you want it, say no. Because you're not just signing up for whatever dollar amount you're going to pay. And usually they have a payment plan. And the one that I saw was like for 17% over the life of that contract.
Yeah.
For that 10 years. Plus you're going to pay 10 years at $1,000. So you're going to pay another $10,000 fee. So, and just for an example, we'll just say I bought the $20,000 package. So I would have 20,000 out plus another 10 for that time frame. So for 10 years, I would have paid $30,000 or $3,000 a year. Now, will I find, you know, value in that? Well, I don't know, because I might not spend $3,000 every year on vacation. That's just not me. I'll be very honest. This year I'll spend more than 3,000, but the year after I'll probably spend maybe $500.
Yeah, I got
All
caught in
depends
one of
on-
those before. But what I was talking about is it's kind of like a loan. So they basically give you a loan to cover the cost of your vacation, and then you pay it back in installments. So I know what you're talking about, which is like a timeshare, and those are like
Right.
the worst things in the world to get out of, from personal experience. But this little basically take a loan out to take a vacation. I mean, it kind of seems kind of predatory to me, like title loans, just taking advantage of your assets quickly.
Right.
But I mean, it doesn't make sense to do if you're going to be paying on it in installments or saving for it in installments anyway.
I would probably save it in installments like I did for my cruise versus taking a loan out. Because because if I spend $4,000 on the cruise and I take it out as a loan, now it's going to be, depending upon the interest rate, let's just say it's 25%. I'm just using an easy number, and it's going to take 2 years to pay back the $4,000. So I think the rough math is I'm going to pay $2,000 in interest on $4,000 in 2 years at 25%. That's $2,000 I could use somewhere else in my life in a better effect. Right. I'm already halfway to the next trip based on that scenario. Very much so.
Cool beans.
No, good question. I have not heard of that product in the past. So that must be something new that's popped up.
Yeah, in the last couple of years, the more that people have been traveling, these, because there's more than one company offering it now. But Klarna was one that pops into my head. Yeah, and they basically give you a loan and you have to just pay it off after you take, or as you take the trip, or leading up to the trip.
Right. Royal Caribbean, which we did our cruise with, we set up the cruise and you had to pay your cruise off with it 60 days before the cruise occurred. So the cruise might have been $2,000 and we had 18 months to pay it off, and that was 0 interest. So you paid it off. As long as you got it paid off 60 days in advance, you're good. The issue becomes when you don't make it that 60 days, what happens? And I couldn't tell you. But if they're charging you interest before you go, then you're getting going behind.
Okay, makes sense.
So one of the things that lenders look at in individuals' lives is what we call debt to income ratio. And what that does is helps a lender make a decision if you have the capacity to repay a loan or take on additional debt. So here's an example of somebody who makes $5,000 gross a month, where their expenses are out of that. Based on the example here, she has $2,000 in expenses divided by 5. So 40% of her income is tied up already in a requirement of payments. So now the question is, at 40%, is she capable of taking on additional debt? 40% is about the level lenders like to see at the max. So if you're going to figure out your debt to income ratio, it's very simple to do. Take all your monthly debts, and I shouldn't say all, take the ones that you know are going to be a reoccurring and you're going to have all the time. And so now I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to tell you, you're going to put your phone in there, because you know what? Your phone is going to be popping up every month and you're going to pay it. You're also going to make sure you put your car insurance in there. It's just not the car debt, it's your car insurance, because you have to have insurance to drive your car. You got your rent, but on top of the rent, I would challenge you to have an average of your electricity, in your water bill, because you need those things. Those are your needs. This monthly debt, you definitely want to have your needs in this column. Then you're going to divide it by your monthly gross income, and it's going to be your debt to income ratio. And it's important to know what that ratio is, because it helps you manage your money. Here they give a breakdown of what they think are good financial health areas. Athlete, less than 30%. Fit, 31 to 36. Borderline, 37 to 40. Unhealthy, more than 40%. I think these numbers are probably a little low. I would probably bump them up. Unhealthy, I would say, is 45. Borderline, probably 40, 45. Fit, 35 to 40. Athlete, anything underneath 35%. Because we're seeing stress levels inside some of the things that we need, so you're seeing stress levels in rent, in car payments, and those things are going up. So when you need to think along those lines and manage your money. So when you think about it, one of the things I suggest to folks, and when they're creating a budget, and we're going to talk more about this next week, is using a plan. It's called the 50-30-20 plan to create a personal budget. It's going to help you. 50% goes towards your needs, 30% wants, and 20% for savings and debt. And you say, why so much to savings and debt? Because number one, you want to pay that debt down, and you want to start building some savings for emergencies. There's 40% of our population cannot put their hand on $500 for an emergency. That's kind of amazing. 40%. Now, I would tell you for needs, 50%, depending upon car payment and rent, it might be up to 55, 57. So what does that mean? You have to take a difference out of your wants and your savings to make up that. Because there's some aspects, because you want to live in a spot that's safe, you might pay a little bit more for rent. So if you increase that percentage, you have to decrease somewhere else. So that may mean that you stop using coffee from the coffee shop and make your own coffee. So instead of spending $6 a day on 1 cup of coffee, you can spend $1.20 and have 3 or 4 of coffee that you've made yourself. So think about figuring out those percentages. So we broke down her income and her monthly expenses into needs and wants. And so the next slide would, nope, it didn't. So I'm going to grab my calculator here and I'm going to run that number. Give me a second. Thought the next slide did that for me. It's always good to have a smartphone because, you got that calculator right on there instead of having to go around and look for it. So 3750 divided by 5,000.
What is that, 75%?
75% is in her needs. $1,000 should be 20%. So she's only got 5% for her savings and debt management. And that's what you're going to find out when you start doing this. And then you need to start figuring out that next step to help yourself out. Of course, how does debt affect your credit score? So what do you think is the most important factor in determining your credit score out of A through E? Okay. Let's see if anybody throws anything in the chat. I guess, Keisha, you'd be the only one in the chat, right?
Yeah. Even me or any comments I see on Facebook, which I don't see at the time.
All right. Well, if everybody was thinking about A is correct. Your payment history is over 35, I believe it's 35% of your credit score. Then it looks at your available credit. So an example of what they're looking at, so if you have $10,000 available on a credit card and you're only using 2,000, you've used 20% out of the 10. So you would have a good ratio of availability to usage. Now, if you've got 10 and you're using 9 or using 90%, then you would have a negative score in that column towards creating your credit score. So instead of getting a positive effect, you might have a negative effect towards your credit score. Of course, how long have you had the credit card? I will tell you, I accidentally closed the credit card that I had for over 25 years. I wasn't paying attention. I thought, I don't need it. I haven't had that long. And then all of a sudden I closed it and my credit score went down 10 points immediately. Now came back over a period of time, but because I closed out a card that I had for a very long time, they took that as a negative event in my life. They also keep track of new credit. Are you adding a lot of credit or looking at trying to add credit when they look at your activity? And of course, they look at your mix of credit, how much you have in fixed and how much you have in variable. So all 5 of those categories is composed into your credit score. So think about it. Who has access to your score? Credit card companies and lenders. The cell phone company may pull it up. When you go rent, the new landlord might want to pull a credit report. He wants to charge you $50 because that's what he's going to pay. Or that was what they paid when I was renting, 20 years ago. So I couldn't tell you if it's $50 or if it's more. utility companies might look into it. Some state employers look at credit, depending upon what kind of job. In the banking industry, I will tell you, they do look at credit scores because they want to make sure that the employees they hire are in good standing in that aspect. I couldn't tell you government assistance programs that they pull a credit score. That doesn't sound right, but I don't know. Governmental licenses might require that. And depending upon your state, auto and homeowners insurance may pull a credit score. Some states, they do not allow that because it's been determined credit score does not factor into being a good or bad driver. You can have a great credit score. And I know plenty of people that have great credit scores, but I would not ride in their car. And I know they got plenty of speeding tickets. So I would want to stay away from them to ride with them. Now, would I lend them money? Absolutely. But I think should it impact their auto score? No, it should be based on your behaviors as an auto or homeowner. Of course, interest rates and credit scores go hand in hand. Excuse me. So here's an example. We have a couple purchasing a home with 20% down on a 30-year mortgage. Both of them have a little bit different credit score. One has a better credit score, as you can see. One's going to get a 5.5% interest rate. The other one got 4.5. So that affects you by about, in this example, about $2,400 over 30 years. That's $60,000 more that she paid for her house than the gentleman. And that was based just on credit score. They had everything else was the same. Now we talked about that 50, 30, 20 and using that 20 for savings and debt recovery. You want to use this that 20%. Number one, to create an emergency fund with 3 to 6 months of living expense. You think that's a lot of money, but if you think back, in the last 18 months, we've gone through a tremendous change in what's happened in our world. And some people were unemployed for a long period of time. And even with unemployment and the extra, that wasn't enough to cover their living expenses. So if they had emergency fund, they were all good, doing okay. And if they didn't, then they were trying to figure out ways to move forward. Also allows you to maximize that 401k employer match. I tell everybody, think about it this way. I've told my son multiple times, and he gets a 401k with a match, and it's a 4% match. So every $100 he puts into his 401k, he's going to get a free $4. That's pretty good return for doing absolutely nothing. He gets free $4 every $100. So it makes a lot of sense to meet that match because it will help you get to your retirement and be in standing in a much better financial standing at that point in time. Of course, you want to pay. There's different things, ways to look at your debt, pay off high interest and high APR debt. Of course, you can contribute 15% of your gross income to retirement. And of course, you can pay off low or interest debts by reducing some other areas. So there's some thoughts here, and we're going to keep going with down that vein here in a second. So there's two strategies for debt repayment. One's called the avalanche. The other one's the snowball. And as I told you, I like the snowball better, but I'm going to talk about the avalanche for a second. The avalanche is the idea of you pay your highest interest rate off first. So you're going to list off, as you see here, with your highest interest rate on the top and your lowest interest rate on the bottom. And you're going to take all your, you're going to pay minimum on the bottom two. And you can take all your extra money that you have and you're going to put it on that 26%. And the idea is to pay that down first and then move that money down to the retail credit card and then move it down to that personal loan. So the idea is to pay off the highest interest rate to the lowest. The snowball method is a little bit different. And that's just the opposite. In snowball, you're going to list the smallest balance on the top. And then you're going to go to the medium balance and to the highest. So in this scenario, you would have $800, $1,800, and $3,000 at the very bottom. And you're not looking at the interest rate. You're going to do the minimum again on the two bottom, and you're going to take your excess and put it on the top. So you're going to pay off that $800 first. So just for an example, we're going to pay $25 to the retail, the major credit card. We're going to pay $25 for the personal loan. That freed up $25 that we're going to put on to the other $25 we were paying on to the retail credit card. So now we're going to pay $50 to that $800. So instead of $25 to that $800 and taking 8 years, now we're going to do $50 and only take 4 years. So when we get done, this will have come down a little bit, but now I'm going to take that $50 and move it to that $25. Now I'm going to pay $17. And I get done with this, I'm going to take that $75, move it to this $25. So now I'm paying $100. And you see, you get a good effect. You feel really good when you eliminate some debt because you see forward progress. So remember, when you think of debt management strategies, you may be able to negotiate with creditors. You can work with credit counselors to help you create plans. You can look at consolidating your debt. So if you're a homeowner, you might have equity in your house. You might think about doing a home equity loan as an example. It's not something I recommend, but you could do it and go from 18 down to 5%. The thing is if you do that and consolidate it and pay other debt off and you create new debt at a lower rate, if you add back that debt you just paid off, you're actually in worse condition. You would have been better off not doing the home equity and struggling to pay off the first debt. And of course, a debt settlement attorney, which to me, that means you're looking at bankruptcy, which is the worst effect you want to look at, because remember, 7 to 10 years on your credit history, and it really has an impact on what you're trying to do as you move forward in life. Things you don't want to do: don't close out credit card accounts. If you get them down to 0 and they don't have a yearly fee, keep them open. Maybe use them once a year, put $20 on it so it just stays active, and then pay it off. I do that on a couple credit cards. I just use them for $50 once a year. I pay it off and it just sits there and it's sitting out there and I have it. And it gives me that difference in availability and what I've used. So if I have 10,000, I'm only using $100. I look really good in the eyes of people who are checking my credit. Don't trust all debt settlement companies. Do research. See if anybody else has used the company that you're working with. Don't sign or commit to anything until you've done it and listened to multiple agencies. And don't hide from your creditors. Answer them. Try to set up plans. Have conversations. A majority of your creditors are going to try to work with you. Here's an example of debt consolidation. Like I said, they consolidated this debt down into a regular loan with a lower interest rate. They don't show it here, but interest rate with a balance and minimum payment that's less than what they were paying up here. That's how you wanted to make sure it works. And so you want to make sure when you do that, you're becoming out to a positive. Because if you go with the same interest rate the same balance and a higher minimum payment, you're going to be struggling. Remember, you're not alone. About 35% of adults with a credit history have a debt collection, owing an average of almost over $5,000. And of course, 2019, before we went through pandemic, 3/4, and they were saying the economy was rolling along. 750,000 people filed bankruptcy. It's a huge number, even in an economy that was working really well. Remember, try to pay everything on time. That is the biggest help in managing your credit score. Because when you miss those, it affects your credit score immediately. It stays out there for a long period of time. Here it says 7 years. I accidentally missed a couple payments. I knew it took over 48 months for it to fall off my annual credit report when I was looking at that. Remember, you can get sued and you can have wage garnishment, liens on property, foreclosure, or repossession. So if you start getting down that path, I recommend talking, to an attorney. Look up the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act so you know your rights. When you're talking to somebody, document it and follow it up in writing. And then save all those communications and correspondence back and forth. And I'm most willing to tell you to send it registered, so they have to sign for it, so you know someone has signed for the document you sent to them. So if they have agreed to something, nothing starts until it's in writing and you've documented it and they've confirmed it by receipt. I bring it up because it happens. We go through chapter 7, chapter 13. It takes a while to happen. You need to have a professional, depending upon where it is. Maybe you see here, maybe an option for people for 7, option for people do not have a lot of liquid assets or property, because liquid assets and property can be used to pay off creditors. They can make you sell your home if that's part of it, and if it's in the right state. Some states it will tell you your home is outside of a bankruptcy. Chapter 13 may put you on a payment plan to repay debts. And of course, remember, bankruptcy is going to sit on your credit report for up to 10 years. May not discharge all debt and maybe force you to liquidate assets that you do not want to liquidate. So just thought process as we go through, write down some information about yourself to figure out where what your monthly gross income is, what is your monthly debt, what are your needs and wants, figure out your interest rate, create an Excel spreadsheet. Almost everybody has access to Excel spreadsheet. It's called something different in Apple. I think it's called Sheets. They're real easy. You can go online, you can find examples that help you. If you type in 50, 30, 20 budgeting, it will pull up probably a free example of how to create a budget for you. And like I said, we'll talk more about that next week, the next 2 weeks. So we went through a lot of stuff and we're 3 minutes out from the end of the session. So I'm going to open it up to questions. Keisha, if you have some, throw them my way. People out there probably have questions.
I think most of debt management for me starts with budgeting. And so I get, because we have that session next week, or in the coming weeks. I don't want to push too much, but this was a lot of information. Uh, being able to calculate the DTI is important. A lot of which I've had to deal with, like buying a house, getting loans. That DTI is very important. But I want to look at that realistically, from what we are calling, I mean, just the average person's income, and we have this ratio of these percentages, but what does that really look like when when you're working class?
Right. And that's why I say here in this example they have, but in real life, I think the percentages are off.
Yeah.
When you start adding a house, car, insurance, instead of 50, you're probably closer to 55%.
Now, when we talk about what's going to be long lasting, would childcare be considered a debt?
No,
Okay.
it,
So it wouldn't affect your DTI.
you have to factor it in. That's an interesting question because my daughter has to budget in her daycare for the grandchild
Mm-hmm.
right now. So you have to work it into a budget. And at the beginning, it's kind of interesting. Child care is one of the sliding scales because as the child gets older, you're going to spend less on daycare,
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, right up front, it can be really, really expensive because newborns are probably the most expensive daycare there is out there.
What? $300 a week and up? Yes, very.
Yeah.
Very.
And so if you're working, that's not a want, that's a need. And so you need to factor that in there because you're going to have to create other aspects of your budget around that $300. But when the child turns 5 and they go to kindergarten, say they go to all day kindergarten, so now they only need 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. And instead of 300 a week, it's 100 a week. You change that number in your budget from 300 down to 100. You still need it in your needs because you still need to have that daycare. So now the child turns 14 and you no longer need to have daycare. So now that goes to 0 and that money slides over, to wherever you want to put it. Yeah, daycare it's kind of really hard because it's a want, but also in some aspects it's a need.
And that's what I'm saying. It's usually a need. If most parents wouldn't put their child in somebody else's care if they didn't have to.
Right.
But in that, when people are looking at what you're capable or able to pay, they're not factoring in these other necessities per se. They're looking at what is on the credit report versus like your actual expenditures.
Correct. They're not going to see, right. They're not going to see your budget. All they're going to see is that you have credit card debt, mortgage debt, car debt. And they'll figure in that you're going to have, an average for a certain percentage for car insurance, homeowners insurance, when they do some calculations for debt to income. When you go to apply for a loan, they're not going to ask you to see your budget. They're going to expect you to know how to, do everything else. So they might give you a great example would be you go in and they say, well, you're good for a loan from 75,000 to 200,000. Well, you go, great. I'll take the $200,000 loan because that's going to give me, 6-bedroom house, 4-car garage, blah, 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 blah. But in our heads, we don't calculate what that $200,000 house payment looks like until after you get to that point and you go, wait a minute, what did I just do? You just think I qualify for it, so I want it. They never tell you that your $75,000 payment, it's going to be $750 a month, principal, interest, and all the other stuff, escrow. And at $200,000, it's going to be $2,000 a month. Big differences.
Huge.
All we know, because we're human, is I have the ability to look at that bigger number and do it. The loan officer doesn't know all the other scenarios to say, well, you really shouldn't have the 200,000. You should look at 125 because that matches all your other expenses in life that meet your needs and wants.
That answers my question. And we don't have many on debt management. I think I don't know. I think we've been learning how to rob Peter to pay Paul for quite a while.
Been there. I've done that plenty of times myself.
But I thank you for showing up on time, for your expertise, and for your willingness to support our financial literacy program. Thank you so much, Mike.
You're welcome. I appreciate everybody who joined in tonight. Look forward to talking to you guys next week again. Stay safe, stay warm, and I guess on Thursday, stay indoors because it's supposed to be ugly out. So.
Will do.
Keisha, I'll talk to you. I'll shoot you an email and I'll talk to you later this week or next.
All right, wonderful.
All right, I'm going to end everything and I'll see you guys next week. Take care.